Hi everybody, welcome to AP European History, your summer assignment. On Schoology, you can now access the summer assignment that I've created for this course. If you have some friends who have taken the course before, this one will be slightly different. It will contain the same books that it did the previous year, but I've added a podcast this time to provide some really rich background. So I'll just walk you through it really quickly in preparation for the course. The first part is going to be the podcast. It's a podcast called Hardcore History by Dan Carlin. So you can download a podcast app if you do not have one. There are several out there that are excellent. And then you will subscribe to his show. Right now, the podcast is free, and his channel looks something like this. It's a little hard here with the reflection, but Dan Carlin, Hardcore History. And you will scroll down to episode number 48, Prophets of Doom. There are 14 episodes, I believe he has right now showing, but you can actually access all the episodes before that as well. I just think that it's the first 14 that come up, and Prophets of Doom is the very last one. And so you'll just click on it and begin playing it. It's about 4 hours long, 4 hours and 15 minutes long. And so because of the length, I encourage you to chunk your listening. So take your time with it, listen to it in the car, or if you're traveling anywhere, just here and there. Dan Carlin is a journalist who I believe majored in history, and so he has a love of telling stories, and he's really good at it. And Prophets of Doom is set in 1533 through 1535, which is perfect for our course. The way that he sets up the story is actually the exact same way I'm going to be setting up the course for you. We are going to start AP European History with the ending of the medieval times and Europe going through this massive transition into what we now call the Renaissance. And it's a period of great turmoil. The feudal system is collapsing, and we see the rise of nation states. And in addition, there is a part of Europe or European history that is incredibly important, and that is the Reformation. This great divide that happens in Europe with the Roman Catholic Church, who was originally and traditionally the religious power and institution for centuries up until this time. And so a man named Martin Luther questions the church, and we'll talk about that more in the class, and really sparks this entire break within Europe. And it's difficult, I think, for us to think about the Roman Catholic Church in this way, but it acted a little more than just a church or a religious organization. It was basically its own government, and it had a great deal of power. And so during this transition between periods, there's a huge power struggle going on in Europe between peasants, people who have risen up into middle and upper classes as a result of technologies. They create things called guilds. And then from there, the traditional lords and kings and princes who have inherited power and land through the centuries, their power is also being questioned as well. And so lots and lots of dynamics going on here. And this podcast does a great job of setting the stage on a very macro level, which is perfect for our course. And then Carlin will go into great detail and focus on this one city in Germany. And Germany, or the Germanic states, are the originators of the Reformation. This is where Martin Luther is going to come out of. And so it's great that we tell this story within that context. And so the city is called Munster, where Carlin will tell this Jonestown-like story, this almost cult I shouldn't say almost, it's definitely some sort of cult that manifests itself in the city and takes it over. And so the story is rich with very interesting characters, as well as told within the context of a much larger power struggle that's going on in Europe. And so the microscopic level that you focus on for much of the podcast actually is intricately related to the content we will cover in this course. So please enjoy the podcast. I think it's wonderfully done. It's very interesting and it whets your appetite for the rest of the course, which is why I'm putting that as part one in your first assignment. So you'll, after you listen to this episode, write a 3-page, double-spaced, full 3 pages in response to the 4-hour episode. You will find that it's not going to be very difficult to do. There's a lot there to work with. Please always be thinking about the context in which this story is told. Again, it's meant to be your response, your reflection. What sticks out to you? What's interesting? What do you already know about the time period? How might this relate? Again, I'm leaving it open-ended purposely because I want your responses. I want your reactions. I want your flavor. But I can also be able to tell if you've listened to the whole podcast by reading your responses, because the podcast is such a interesting story that it's, how can you not respond to the story in some sort of way? It's going to evoke a lot of emotion. After you go through the podcast and complete part 1, I'm having you read 2 books, which are traditional for AP European history for this course. The Prince by Machiavelli, and the other is Utopia by Thomas More. Both books talk about a vision that they want European society to look like during this transition. Again, this power struggle between classes and wars of religion going on during this period. These books are heavily instrumental and influential to the culture. After you read them, I would like you to answer questions. This needs to be typed, preferably after you write part 1 for the podcast. So it's all going to basically be stapled together. And these questions compare the 2 books. And then the last question I have you compare the books to the podcast as well. The part 3, you need to memorize a current European map and just the countries, not capitals or anything like that. And there has been a blank map attached, but I'm sure you can find a better one online. And you need to practice being able to locate where all the European countries are. The responses to the book and the paper will be due the first day of school. So make sure that Wednesday when you come in, you have both responses typed. I will not accept handwritten responses. It must be typed and printed. You cannot share it with me on Google Drive or email it to me. It will be considered late if you do so. Anything that is late in my course is automatically half the points. So make sure you're ready to go the first day of school. I will expect that you will be able to discuss the summer assignment in class that day. On the Monday, our first Monday back to school, you will have a map test on Europe, and you will just have to label the countries on a blank map. So make sure that you do parts 1, 2, and 3 in a timely manner. Don't wait the night before because you won't be able to finish it. It's impossible. Even if you can, and I don't do this, don't Spark Note it or whatever the current aid is in reading and literature for students, because you'll miss quite a bit when you do that. but you definitely won't be able to SparkNote the podcast either. So please take your time with this. Again, do the podcast first, because I think if you do that first, Machiavelli and Utopia are older works and the language is a little different, and I think you're going to be able to comprehend that a little better and be a little more interested in it if you do the podcast first, because the podcast is definitely a gripping story that you're going to really enjoy. If you have any questions at all, I occasionally check my email during the summer, so please feel free to email me if something's confusing to you or you can't find something. Both Machiavelli's The Prince and Utopia are usually always available at Barnes & Nobles. I did request at the Sawmill location that they ensure there's copies for AP European History. I know that right now they're selling The Prince in the context of a couple other writings. It's not a very big book here. And so it'll be coupled with a few more works, but it's only $6.95. So it's not really a big deal if you buy the other works as well. And then I believe Utopia might be its own separate book as well. But you can also find these at used bookstores or order it online, whatever you prefer. There's not really a version that, like the latest copyright version. You don't need to go out and buy that for this class. I just need you to read the two books. So again, let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing you all in August. Happy summer.